Hey everyone, welcome back to another practice. So in this one, we're going to create a really cool random number game. The idea with this game is that you as a user will enter a number, and based on that number, the computer is going to generate a random number, and your job is to guess that random number. And at the end, when you finally guess the number, it's going to tell you how many attempts basically it took for you to actually finish the game. So again, it's a pretty interesting one because it's going to require you to use a lot of if statements and a lot of while loops and all sorts of things, and also a few other things that we haven't talked about so far, at least at the current stage of the course. And it would be interesting for you to actually watch me do it. So let's actually talk about the game. As always, you can access the replit file in the resources section. So if you just go to resource section, you're going to be able to access the replit. You can just fork it for yourself and start coding. So again, what you want to do is you want to start by getting a number from the user, generate a random number from 0 up to the one that user entered. For example, if the user enters the number 10, you need to generate a random number from 0 to 10. All right, so that's very, very important. And then you want to ask the user to make a guess to see whether that number is correct or not, and it's going to display a message if the guessed number is correct. If not correct, it'll go back and ask for the number again, and finally it keeps a count of how many times the user has tried, right? And at the end, it's going to display the correct number and how many guesses it took. So again, let's run this real quick, and let me actually show you how this whole thing works. So we're going to enter a number. I'm going to keep it pretty simple because I don't want us to try like 5,000 things. Okay, so 5 is going to be my number, and so now there's a random number generated from like 0 to 5. So let's make a guess. I'm going to say 1. It's going to say wrong number, and it's going to ask for the number again. 2, wrong number. 3, and there you go. So it says you guessed the correct number in 3 tries. Perfect. So just like that, we guessed the number. Very simple. So I want you to think about this, and I want you to see if you can get it done by yourself. So give it a go, give it a try and see how you can actually get this done, and let me know if you have any questions. So just pause the video and try and see if you can do it. All right guys, so hopefully you tried to actually solve this and maybe you learned something. If you tried to do it and you didn't get it done, that's completely fine. You can watch me do it and maybe you can find the mistakes that you've made. Now, one of the things I'd like to point out before we actually start is that I wanted to make this particular practice because this actually requires some stuff that we haven't talked about so far. And based on my experience learning programming, one of the things is that the best way to actually learn something is just do it in action. And I thought a few things that we're going to be using essentially is going to are something that, again, we haven't talked about so far in the course, and we will talk about them later on as we go down. And I just thought it would be nice for you to see them in action, actually see it, how you can actually put it to use and all that stuff. So it would be a pretty interesting way to learn it, at least. All right, so with that being said, let's go ahead and start. So I'm going to do the first thing, which is just importing the random, method or the random function or whatever you might want to call it. So that's the first thing we want to do. And then I'm just going to receive a number from the user. I'm just going to say user number. Okay, we're going to say equals input, and we're going to say please enter a number. All right, so we're going to do that, and let's actually make sure it's in the next line. So I'll just do that. There you go. So \n, that again, that shoots it to the next line, right? So far we got the basics set up. All right, so the first thing we want to do is, this is something that I haven't talked about, and again, I want to just do it for you guys, is that one of the things I want to do is I want to make sure it is a number. So because right now, if the user just runs this, they can just enter whatever, and it's just like, it's not gonna work out, especially if you're making a game about a number. You want to make sure it is a number, otherwise like it's just going to mess the whole thing up. So what I want to do is I'm going to create an if statement and make sure that we got a number here. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to say if user number okay, and we're going to use the isDigit function. Okay, so this is called isDigit, and it just checks whether something is a digit or not. All right, again, I'm gonna let me just comment it out for you. It checks if a value is a digit or not. Apologies for my typing. My keyboard is not in front of me, and it just causes a lot of issues. Anyways, so I'm just gonna say user number equals integer. So we want to turn it into an integer. That's very important. Okay, so again, that's very, very important. And then we're gonna say again, if the user number, if it is a digit, we want to turn it into an integer. So again, because when user enters it, it's gonna be a string, right? So we gotta do that. And then I'm gonna use another if statement. I'm gonna say if user number is going to be less than or equal 0, we just want to reject the whole thing. So we're gonna say print, please type a number larger than 0. And the first thing, again, that like we talked about isDigit, the function. Another thing that we want to do is that in this case, I just want to keep it simple. So what I want to do is I want to quit if this happens. All right, so I'm just going to quit, and we're just going to do this. Then this is called a quit function. And again, what it does is just closes the program. So if the number is a digit, but if it's less than 0, you know, or if it's 0 or less than 0, it's going to just quit the program. So let's actually run this and test it out. All right, so please enter a number. We're going to say 0. Please type a number larger than 0, and it's going to quit the program. There you go. Anyways, so that's that. So next step is we want to just create an else statement. All right, so I'm just going to say else, and we're going to say print, please type a number next time. Now the reason we want to do this is if they actually fail to enter a number, like when they, like, let's say we enter gibberish here and it doesn't work out, we're going to show this, right? So again, if I run this, let me just make this a little bit bigger. If I run this, if I just enter, for example, whatever, it's going to say please enter a number next time. Just like that. So that's the first thing we want to have. All right. Now the next thing we want to do is we're going to generate the random number. All right. That's another thing that we need to do. Just make a random number. Okay. So let's go ahead and do that. Random. I'm gonna make a function or variable. I'm gonna call it random number, and we're going to say random. If you remember, this is how you generate a random number. Rand int. And we're going to say this is going to be 0. Again, that's the beginning of that random number, and we're going to say user number. So again, what we did here is pretty simple. We generated a variable, and we use this variable. We put a value inside a variable, and the value is essentially a range, okay, a random number between 0 and the user number, or whatever the user is going to enter here. So just like that, we created our random number. So if I actually print this, let's print a random number, and let me show you what happened here. So if I run this, we're gonna say 10. It's going to generate a number between 0 and 10. There you go. That's 6. So just like that, we generated a random number. Perfect. All right. So next step is to keep this score, right? Essentially how many times someone tried. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep the score, and the way we do it, if you remember, and that's something I mentioned in the previous practice as well, we use a variable and started with a 0. So I'm just going to say guesses equals 0. So just like that, we have the initial guess number going on, right? So one of the things we want to do, the next one, is create the while statement. So the idea with this is that the way we want to detect these correct numbers, that we're going to say if the number is correct, if the number that user detects, if the number that user is going to enter is correct, we're going to match it and say you corrected, that you chose the right guess, and like your guess was correct. And if not, you know, you're wrong. So the way we're going to do this, I'm going to use a boolean. I'm going to use a boolean type, and something that we haven't talked about a lot, but I want to like kind of present it to you here. So while true, that's you know, again, that's true or false. All right, we're going to say user number equals input, and I'm going to write this and explain it to you. Make a guess. So the idea is that we're going to say, while this is true, run this whole thing. All right. So the idea is that we're going to run this whole code block that belongs to this while loop until the user guesses the correct number. All right. So while true, we're going to say user number equals input. So we're going to just get a number, and we're going to say if user number, well, yeah, let's actually turn that to the digit as well, is digit. Here we go. And we're going to say user number equals integer, and we're going to say user number. So what I did here is I simply just received the number from the user when they enter this while loop, and I'm going to say if the user number is a digit, essentially if whatever they entered is not hello or something, if it's a digit, turn it into an integer immediately. All right. And what else? Anything else? Something else we're going to put is the else statement. So we're going to say else. That means if it's not a digit, if someone enters hello, for example, we're going to say print, and that was not a number. All right. Now, one of the things I'd like to introduce you to is the continue keyword. The idea with a continue keyword is that when you run a while loop and you have if statements inside, a while loop keeps running until the condition is not met, right? So one of the things you can do if you have if statements inside a while loop, when if statement ends, essentially it stops the while loop. This way we can actually, if you use a continue keyword, what's going to happen is that it's going to continue the loop until the condition is met. All right, so we're going to say continue. Here we go. And we're going to do another if statement. All right, so we're going to do another if. Let me just do it right on the same level. There you go. If user number equals random number. So this is when they guess the right number. We're going to say print, you got it. Perfect. All right. So just like that, we say you got it. But here's the thing though, we want to keep a score, right? So one thing I want to do is that under the same if, we're going to say guess plus equals 1. So when they guess that, and if they guess it right, you know, we're going to essentially add 1 to this guess value, right? Okay. So one of the things is that another keyword I'd like to introduce you to is the break keyword. Now, I'm just going to put it right here. The idea with the break keyword is that it's going to end the loop. Now, think about it. If they actually get the number right, we're essentially done with this loop. So I want this loop to end immediately. All right. But again, in this case, if they enter the wrong number, I want this to continue. Right? So I want this to continue. I want this code to continue running the rest of whatever we have under this while loop. So in this case, I want it to break. That means stop, like running this while loop when it reaches that, when we get the number right, essentially. And then one last thing we want to add is just the else. Okay. So again, the idea of, let's actually make sure we indent it right. So that would be in the same level as the if. I want to indent it right. So the idea with this is that we're going to say, if that means if they don't enter the wrong number, that means they got the wrong number wrong. So wrong number. Here we go. And then I'm just going to add 1 to the guess. 1. So again, let's think about what happened here. All right, I know this can get a little bit confusing, but let's think about it. So we got a while loop, very simple, right? And it's what we're saying is a while true means that while this applies, just continue running this loop. Just go through this loop over and over and over. So that's what a while true means, or you can use the while false, whatever you want really. So while true means that while this is happening, just continue running this loop. So we're going to say while the user number, so the first thing we're going to ask is ask for the input from the user. If the user number is digit, that means that if it's a number, we want to turn it into a number, right? And if it's not, we're going to say, well, that's not a number. So we're going to say, okay, that's not a number, continue. And think about it. If the user enters something that is not a number, what is going to happen is that if we continue, okay, if we continue, none of these conditions are going to apply, right? So what do you think is going to happen? If we continue, none of these conditions are going to apply. So we're going to go all the way up here again. We're going to say make a guess. See? So because we said continue, but none of these actually apply, right? Because there was no number, and you know they didn't enter the wrong number either. So what happens? We go all the way back up again. So they're going to keep entering the number. So if the number is correct, we're going to say you got it. And again, it's going to say if it's equal to random, we're going to say you got it. And if not, let me just make sure, random number. But yeah, anyways, I think I made a mistake. I'll tell you what is it. But like, if it's not, we're going to say wrong number. So just like that. Yeah, because I think we got the random number wrong. There you go. Here we go. That should fix it. Let's try it out and see if it works. All right. Enter a number. I'm gonna say 5. Make a guess. 1. You got it. There you go. So that's that. So now we got pretty much the code almost done. So what we gotta do is we gotta have our final statement printed. All right. So I'm just gonna say print. And this is again outside of the loop or the while loop. So this is again after the while loop is finished, when they guess the right number essentially. So we're gonna say F. We're gonna use an F statement. We're gonna say you guessed you guessed the correct number in. There you go. Let's copy that bracket. Guesses in guesses tries. Here we go. So that should actually give us a statement at the end as well. All right, so let's take a look. Enter a number. I'm going to say 4 for example. I just want to keep it short, so let's make a guess. 1 2 3. You got it, and it's going to say you guessed the correct number in 3 tries. So guys, hopefully this was helpful and hopefully you learned something. You know, again, I just wanted to kind of introduce you a little bit, unofficially introduce you to the continue keyword and the break keyword. And remember, the break keyword ends the loop, or ends the program, ends the loop essentially, and continue is going to just send it all the way down and continue the loop essentially, even if this applies. All right, so that's pretty much it. Let me know if you have any questions. As always, you can access the project files in the resource section, and I'll see you in the next practices.